Welcome back to the Marketing Girly podcast. I am super excited for today's guest. Today I'm chatting with Christine Watanabe. She is the Senior Social Media Care Manager for Paramount Plus. Welcome, Christine.
Hi, well, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I actually don't think I've encountered a job title like yours, Christine. So I'm very excited to jump into what you do and what your role entails. I love, with the podcast, we always try to interview women that have kind of different titles to kind of show what's out there within marketing, because there's a lot more you can do than you probably think. So very excited to dive into that. And then also your career journey of how you got to where you are here today. We're going to touch on how to get started when you don't have a lot of experience, starting your career late, and we're going to dive into Christine's previous career history. But before we do all of that fun stuff, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I grew up in Northern California in the Bay Area. So that's where I even went to school. I went to school in San Francisco State after doing a little community college and then transferred over. Um, and then went to LA to do the whole like entertainment business thing. After college, I actually have a degree in broadcast electronic communication arts, which is just a fancy way to say television and radio. um, did a lot of writing for that class too. So, after LA, doing odd jobs here and there, moved back to the Bay Area, and then moved back to LA again for this role. And I'm actually now in Texas, working full time remotely, which is nice.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm now the senior social media care manager for Paramount Plus streaming service. And I agree with you. There's not a lot of titles with my title.
No. Yeah,
Yeah.
super,
So
super unique. I'm also curious. So what part of Texas are you in?
I'm in North Dallas.
Okay. So I also moved from California to Texas.
Okay.
I'm in Austin now, but what prompted the move if you're working remote?
Yeah. So, when COVID came, everything was shut down. We were working from home. I already had my daughter at the time who was 1.5 years old. And, my husband and I always wanted a house. We were trying to find some, in the LA area, but it was so expensive
So
and the area
expensive.
was just as expensive.
Yeah.
I actually have family up here. My brother raised his three girls, and my husband actually grew up in Texas as a kid for about 2 years. So
Oh,
he loved it. So yeah, I mean, we just kind of looked at the housing market then. And it was really cheap in a good community, good schools. And then within 2 weeks of getting a real estate agent, we put our first bid and
oh
got
my
the house.
goodness.
So without even seeing it, we we looked at pictures. Our real estate agent saw it, FaceTime us through it. And we're like, yeah, we'll get it. And we didn't
What?
think we were gonna get it. We're just like, oh well, we'll just try it. And it was weird. Yeah, within 2 weeks, we
That's
got a house.
crazy. You guys also moved at a good time because I think over the next couple of years after early pandemic, then the housing prices like skyrocketed. I know specifically in
Yeah.
Austin, the like housing market got crazy.
Mhm.
I also moved very similar in California. COVID hit. I was like, okay, let's like this is the time to like try something, start something,
Yeah.
like go somewhere new. And I moved to Austin and I absolutely love it. The one thing though, because when you come from California versus going to Texas, the summers, I know it's like cliche, but the summers are just so, so brutal here in Texas.
Yes. Yes, it is. None of my family members want to visit here summer ever again. And
Yeah,
I don't.
that's like the only downside. I'm this summer, I'm trying to like not be in Austin. I'm like, I'm gonna plan trips all
Yeah.
summer, so I'm not here.
Well, luckily where I live, there's a lot of, because where I live, it's a community of like young families. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
indoor like play
Okay.
places you can take kids, which I've never
Yeah.
seen that many in California.
You need the AC in Texas.
Yes, yes. And I think they
Okay.
did it on purpose because they know their weather is like that.
Yeah, I know. But that is one of the beautiful things about California is like that so much stuff is outdoors and that, you don't need to be indoors all the time to have like temperature control.
Yeah,
But I love hearing like why people move to Texas or just kind of their stories. Because I do love living here now.
yeah.
All right, Christine. So, tell me a little bit about what your role at Paramount entails. Like, what is a social media care manager?
So I lead a team of agents, we call them like customer care agents. You know how when you call and pick up the phone for any like issues you have with a product or service. So this is the same thing, only through social media. So I come up with like the strategy and all of that. You know, we handle Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google Business Messenger. So basically, like those are my team are the ones who are answering customer inquiries on social media of their issues. And I also work really closely with the marketing team as well, because they market like any other service, like promotions or campaigns and all that stuff. So I have to make sure like my team is prepared to answer those. What are those and how can we help? And then also with our copywriting team, I'm really close with because they provide all our messaging. We have to make sure we're staying on brand. Um, so yeah, I work with like a lot of different people in different departments. So yeah, that's kind of what my job is. And I actually started it, and I guess I'll talk about it later, but I actually started from the bottom of that job. I was the one answering it first, and then
Yes.
my way up.
Super interesting. So if I, so let's say I'm on Instagram and I DM Paramount about a question, your
Mhm.
team is the one answering those questions.
Yes.
Now, what if I comment on like an Instagram post about Paramount and I'm like, I hate Paramount, my streaming service, whatever I say about it, are you also responding to that?
Yeah. Yeah, we have our own tools and systems to like grab those cases and monitor, and we want to make sure customers are happy and retain them. I think that's another thing that people, when they think customer service, they don't think marketing, but it is a type of marketing because we
Yeah.
have to retain the customers and promote our service.
The thing that is also, well, first of all, I don't actually hate Paramount. That was just an example. That was just an
Okay,
example.
that's fine.
But also, people on the internet are super, super mean, and
Yeah.
especially when they get to hide behind a fake handle. I know, with TikTok, I'll post a video. I remember I recently posted a video about like marketing jobs that are hiring, and I get a comment that's like, "How is she so cheerful when the job market is so bad?" All right, I'm like, what are
Yeah.
like I'll get the worst comments, and I can imagine a company at a bigger scale, right? When people see a corporation, they're even
Yeah.
more ruthless and they're more mean.
Yeah.
How is it like handling? I guess I know you started kind of doing the one and responding to those things, but
Mhm.
I'm curious for people that don't work at a big corporation like Paramount and they're, maybe the only person on their social team. What advice do you have for responding to someone that's, being really negative on social?
I mean, it depends what they say, right? You're right. We do get a lot of negative comments, not just us too. Every
Yeah,
company that has a
everybody
social
does.
media platform has it, right? What I've learned is that you can't please everyone. Like you can do as much as you can. It just takes that one person, right, to say something mean, and then people will fall. Like, oh yeah, right, this and that. If it's something that we can truly help, like a technical issue, obviously we still want to be sympathetic and try to help them. So, we'll reach out. Again, we have like approved messaging too to handle those types.
Hmm.
Uh, if it gets too far off, like to be honest, we just don't respond because some of these comments, they just want attention and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily help. So, I've learned how to differentiate between the two.
Between someone actually seeking a
Yeah.
resolution versus someone who's just trying to like let their anger out.
Yes, exactly. Because
Okay.
if you try to respond to those, like they'll just get more angry. You
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
because they're just being sarcastic. I know with like text and social, it's hard to tell if they're being serious or not.
Hmm.
But I've been in this role long enough to know when it's serious or not.
Yeah. Okay. So with this, like responding to messages on social, do you guys specifically handle like the negative comments, or do you guys also handle like more neutral or positive, or kind of what is your role within like communication on social specifically?
It's both. It's kind of all over the place. Most people come on social not to say how great we are, right? Not many people do that. But if they do, like we love hearing that, we'll like it or like reshare, retweet it. Um,
Hmm.
and with the negatives, it's mainly like technical issues, like account issues,
Okay.
stuff like that. So we'll do that as well. And then any of the random ones, like I kind of said before, we'll kind of skip over it. But it's stuff that is shared with the company and some departments because they want to, I think it's good to see like the good things that our team does and
Yeah.
that the company does. So I like to kind of share that positively, especially in our role where all my team hears is negative, negative, negative. So
Yeah, that
I
is
like,
hard.
yeah, so I like to share the positive with them when I can. Be like, hey, this person said this, or hey, like look what they said about you here.
Yeah.
That kind of brings up the morale and kind of shows them that they're doing their job really well, and not to
Yeah.
focus on just the bad stuff. Like, hey, we are helping people. We are like, you are doing your job.
Yeah. With Sky Society, similar thing, or not, obviously we don't get that much negative comments just because we're not big enough yet. But we do, obviously a lot of like the work is like problem solving. But we do have a channel where anytime someone like says something good about Sky Society, we like screenshot it and we put it in the channel because it's easy to just focus on all the problems that you have to fix. That's like the day-to-day of what you're always doing. And it's
Uh-huh.
easier to just like gloss over the good things. So I've worked at companies before where they have like channels for that, where it's like, or like in Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever you're using, where you screenshot all the good things that people say to remember and hold on to it. Because it's kind of more rare that you get that positive praise. It's a lot easier, I think, to be more negative on social.
And there is positive. You just have to search a little bit harder.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't require your work. So you're not like
Yeah,
focusing on it, right? Because you need to put your attention to the negative
yeah.
comments.
But I like it when the negative turns into positive. And we get a lot of those too. Like, because sometimes, a lot of people, when they reach out, a lot of them are not really that tech savvy, which I
Mm.
understand, right? That's why they reach out. And also they don't want to like wait on phones for so long because sometimes that can take a while. So, social media I
Yeah.
think is like people go to. I'll admit I've done it before too, to get fast assistance. I'm not as mean though, because I know
You're
how,
like, I know what it's like to be you on the other.
yeah. So I'm like, just help me when you can, right?
I've actually never known I could do that. I've
Yeah.
never ever tried to DM a brand about like, hey, I'm having this issue. That's super
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I tried it and I got like, and I've always told people this, like if you're nicer to them, they'll go above and beyond for you,
Uh,
right? I've done all kinds of customer service in my career, not just social media, and that's what I always tell people. So yeah, I mean, like I did it once with like a bike company. They overcharged me when I was like on vacation and was doing like, one of those rental bikes.
yeah.
Yeah, and they just like provided me like a full refund and
Oh
everything.
wow.
So yeah.
So I'm curious. So from your like entire experience in customer service, not just Paramount, but like you holistically with your career, when chatting with customer service, this is like off topic to marketing, but
Yeah.
I am curious because I know, for example, I'm thinking like airlines. I know like if you miss your flight, they're not going to give you anything unless you like go make a big scene. Or I feel like for example, like if I miss a flight, I'm always like the polite one that's like, it's okay, like no
Yeah.
worries. But then I'll have a friend that's like, yeah, I complained and I got $100 voucher. Or yeah, I argued and I got this. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, and I know you're saying like if you're nice, you're gonna get above and beyond. But I'm curious, like, what's the balance between like being really nice and understanding, but also like
Yeah.
wanting to push to get, something in return.
Yeah. Well, like you don't want to be you want to be nice, but you don't want to be like a pushover either,
Okay.
right? So like kind of what people would say to someone if they're really angry, I'll say it in a nicer way. Like,
Okay.
I understand this is like, and one thing I really appreciate when people do, and I've done too, like, look, I know this is not your fault. Like, I'll start off with that. It's
Mm,
not their fault. They're just like the face of it. They're just doing their
yeah.
job. you know? So I'll say like, look, I know it's not your fault, but like, this is like what I need. Is there anything you can do? Like, I would really appreciate because this is all I wanted. Like, kind of just explain
Yeah.
it and be nice about it. Um, so yeah, that's basically how I like approach things. And it hasn't failed me so far, especially when I tell them like, I understand, like I do this too for a living,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like kind of building that connection with them. And, and I've learned like if people did that to me, I used to be a waiter, you know? So if people did that to me, I'm just like, oh my gosh, do you want like extra chips with your stuff? Like,
Yeah.
that's just kind of like how I approach it. And I try to, especially my parents, they're really old school. So I'm like, be nicer, please.
Yeah, yeah. I like that starting with that. It's like I understand it's not your fault. Because yeah, you're right. Whenever you're talking to a customer service person, and oftentimes, like you said, they have prompted messages, like they have to follow like, a
Yeah,
routine or something like, and they're doing their job. And so it's kind of that balance of like understanding that they have to do their job, kind of
yeah,
with also dealing with the problem or issue.
yeah,
Okay, so obviously here you are um you are a social media care manager, but I want to kind of go back as to how you got here and your a quick kind of overview of your journey. And so I love now after doing this podcast, I if I could change one thing, I would go back and just major in anything else other than business because I love how so many of the women I interview like have such interesting majors and I feel like there's so much pressure in college to like study the perfect thing, but you have
Yeah.
this background in broadcast and electronic communication arts. I know one of the things we also talked about before your episode is that when you were starting your career, you found a lot of struggle with trying to get your first job and not having enough experience. And I think there's a lot of women that I talk to and that I know listen to this podcast are really feeling that pain too, where they really want a job, but they feel like they don't have enough experience for that. So I'd love if you could kind of share how you navigated this early part of your career.
Yeah, so I will say I didn't graduate college until I was 25, which is I feel like at the time is really late. You usually graduate when you're like 21, 22.
Yeah.
And I did that because, I didn't know right away that's what I wanted to major in. I was very undecided, and probably because there was like a lot of pressure in my family to major in something else, in the medical field, which I'm like, I don't like. I did try for a semester and totally quit. I was like, no, no, no. But yeah, so it took me a while to figure out what I wanted. And then, I've always loved the entertainment industry, TV, movies, all that stuff. So that's how I got into that degree. And, I always tell people, I had sisters. I have two younger sisters who are 8 years younger than me. So when they were in college, the first thing I told them to do that would help them is sign up for internships as much as you can, because
Mhm.
that's going to be your experience. That's going to be your network. If you ever graduate and you're on an internship, they might hire you right after graduation. I've seen that before. Um, so yeah, I did two internships during college. I did one for CBS Radio. That was my first one, which is kind of interesting because now I work for Paramount that owns CBS. And yeah, I did CBS Radio, and I did like the CW Pod Squad, if you remember that in the Bay Area, like
Okay.
that. So then right after college, again, like it was really hard to find a job because when I was job searching, first thing they would say, and these are entry level jobs, these are desk jobs, okay? You need 2 years experience, which I think is kind of ridiculous for entry
Yeah.
level positions. Um, because if you think about it, entry level positions is your experience. That's where you get the experience before you move up. So yeah, when I moved to LA, that's all I kept getting hit back to. I did join in a assisted training program. I was in there for a few months and it was really cool. I was working for this non-scripted producer who was like kind of teaching us the ins and outs of the entertainment industry, marketing, PR, because he does all of that. And I really wanted to get into like a management or a marketing or PR firm somehow. Um, and yeah, so like it's brutal out there. He would help us prepare our resumes, like practice the interviews and all that stuff. But I still kept getting met with like, you need 2 years experience, you need 2 years experience. And then I left that training age, I left that training internship because it was about 4 months. He put me into a really respective management company. These are the people who manage like the writers of The Walking Dead. So that was like
Oh,
really
that's
cool.
really cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. But it was like an unpaid like job and
Mm.
I was like, busting my butt to try to prove myself there, I was like getting coffee, like proofreading scripts, like just doing all this stuff. But they weren't looking to hire, unfortunately, right? And I was even talking to the other assistants there. They were getting paid like $12 an hour and working like 12-hour shifts, which is
Wow.
insane. Um, so I stopped that. And then to be honest, I just like kind of spiraled into like this depression of like, oh my God, I'm never gonna get a job. Luckily my parents, especially my mom, helped pay my rent while I can still try to like find a job as much as I could. So I even bounced back from temp job to temp job and like still accepted unpaid internships, just to try to get in there. And none of it was panning out because I realized really quickly, like unless you know somebody, it was hard, right, to get that job. So then I moved back home after 2 years of doing that, because my friend back home was working at Zazzle in finance and said, hey, they're looking for customer service reps. It's a temp, like, do you want it? And I'm like, I need a job. And I need some kind of like, I looked at it as a good like corporate experience opportunity. Is it what I wanted? Is it in my field? Not really. But that's the thing I learned too. Like, your first job is not always gonna be your dream job or what exactly that you want. So yeah, then that's how I ended up at Zazzle. And
Okay, let me super super interesting. I think what you went through from like post grad to like finally finding your footing at Zazzle, I think a lot of people go through, but I think are really afraid to talk about it or kind of share that because it's definitely not the plan you imagine for yourself when you graduate, right? It's like,
Mhm.
I got my degree, like now I'm going to start my career and everything's going to
Yeah,
be beautiful and perfect and I'm going to move in
yeah,
this super straight ladder and it's going to be great. And you not, you were being met with so much rejection, being met with you don't have enough experience, which I mean, Christine, I think you're speaking to so many people in the audience who feel that way. And you also mentioned that you kind of went into this depression of just obviously there's only so much rejection you can take, and you're working so hard and you're just not seeing results. So, curious if you have advice for someone who's kind of going through this period where they're unable to get that dream job that they want or just that starting job that they want. They're feeling really, really discouraged from all the rejection that they're getting. What advice would you give to them?
so first, like, I know it seems like cliche, but like, just don't give up, like, keep trying and keep your window or your door open to other opportunities. Don't just focus on like a specific one. Because like I said, you're not going to get your dream job. I didn't get my dream job till now, and that's like 10 years later, right? Um, So like when I did interview for Zazzle, because one of the things that in school and that in the internships that I was always helping out with because I had passion for was social media. This was before social media blew up. This is when we had MySpace still, you know what I mean? If you remember MySpace, and Facebook was just taking off, right? This was like before Twitter. I mean, Twitter was around, but it wasn't as like high end yet. So I always like somehow knew like social media was gonna come in and like take over the world somehow with some kind of promoting or marketing. So I always helped with that. So during my interview process with Zazzle, I did mention like, hey, if you guys ever plan to do anything with social media within customer care, like, I'd love to get involved in that. And I remember saying that. And then, I got hired there in July. It's through a temp agency, so it's not like a permanent position with Zazzle. It was with yeah, a temp job agency. And then during the holidays, because Zazzle, for those of you who don't know Zazzle, they're an e-commerce company. So they're print on demand. I made all my wedding invitations from there,
Yeah, I've
so
bought from Zazzle too.
yeah. So the holiday season, you can imagine it's very hectic. And that's
Yeah.
when they're starting their like social media kind of customer care. And there was only like two of them. So they needed help. They're like, hey, Christine, can we just like send you these cases and you can take care of them? I was like, yeah. I was like really excited just to do that. um, and so I did it. Apparently, I did really well on it to the point where, like, eventually I actually took over the program and like built it, and
Oh, wow.
even got in charge of their like forums because they have like forums because Zazzle relies on designers from like everywhere to like put their designs on their platform to sell. So within a year, I was hired on full time, and they made a position just for me for that role. So I guess kind of what to say to that is, I didn't expect that kind of like opportunity to come to me. I'm like, oh, it's a print on demand, it's a call center. I'm gonna get yelled at every day, like whatever, but I turned it into something, I put myself out there. And I took a chance on something that I never even thought of that could help me. So that's, I think, is a really important lesson, is to just kind of be more open-minded of the possibilities. Yes, maybe this might not be your dream job at first, but it could, if you prove yourself, which is what I did. Like, there was like 15 other people who started at the same time as me, and I was the only one they promoted and hired on. So if you just kind of like prove yourself and like work hard, like something great might come out of it.
And what's super interesting about that story is that you put yourself out there to create a role for yourself that didn't even exist. So I think another key takeaway I'm getting from your story is that to go above and beyond what you are being asked. I think that a lot of people think that if you just do your job description and that's all, then you are a shining star and there's nothing else that should be expected of you. But I find over and over again that the employees that move up the quickest or that are finding new opportunities are the ones that are doing above and beyond what their job description is. And especially if you want to, like you said, you want to, that's not the role you want to be in. You want to be in a different role. The best way to make that transition into another department at the company, into another role, is to start trying to figure out like how you can do more than what you're already currently doing. Like if you are in customer service and you want to be in social, like go talk to the social team, see how you can help the social team. And those are really great ways to start kind of going above and beyond your role and allowing you to make that switch. So very impressive that you were able to kind of create this entire role for yourself.
Yeah, sure. And I also want to point out, like, obviously, when you first get hired to a place, you don't want to tell them right away, like, oh, I want to go here, you know?
Yeah.
You want to go with it. Like, that's why I said, like, prove yourself first that, like, I'm a good worker for at least like a year, I would say 6 months to a year, because eventually your manager will be like, because, everyone gets mid or end year-end reviews, right? And then that's when the question goes like, okay, well, where do you want to go? Like, what do you want to see? And that's when you can kind of like say, okay, well, this is what I want because you've proven yourself, right? That you can work hard.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Don't come in guns blazing, like, okay, I have this role, but like, actually, I do not want to be here. I want to be somewhere else. First,
Yeah,
prove
and
yourself and then start doing that.
unfortunately, I've had run into that. So not me. I've never.
Really?
Yeah, so that's the first thing I kind of wanted to bring out. Like, don't do that. Like,
That's a
and
real,
yeah, and sorry to cut you off. I'm just thinking like maybe I don't know if a lot of other like young people are doing that. Maybe that's why, but like just I feel like that's something like to be cautious of.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a good point because then that shows that you're not like committed to your current role and what they obviously hired you on to do. Okay, so first step, prove yourself, work hard so that you're good at what you're doing, and then you can kind of start to look to expand outside of your role. And I think one of the things that's also really great is that you knew, Christine, that you wanted to make that transition. But I think sometimes if sometimes we don't always share that with other people. And so it's really important to be vocal about what your goals are to the people at your company so that they
Mhm.
can help make that happen for you because no one can read your mind and assume
Yeah.
that you know what your goals are for yourself.
Mhm.
Okay, so you start here at Zazzle, you start in customer service, and then you create this role for yourself to be the community and social media specialist. And your role expands, to be in charge of all of these forums and these discussions. I am curious the difference between, so why wouldn't a company, same with Paramount, why wouldn't they have the person that does like the normal chat for like customer support, like also do social chat? Kind of what are the like the nuances there that you think make it its own role and not one that's kind of just like jumbled in with like that one customer service person does all of it?
So you mean like a
If
social
that's
media?
clear. Well, like so at Zaz, so we'll use your role now at Paramount. So you started there as a customer care social media associate where you were in social responding to messages. How
Mhm.
come that role is specific and not just that you were a customer associate and one of your responsibilities was social, but you also handled the normal like day-to-day chat? Why is
Yeah.
it its own dedicated role and team?
Yeah, so social is definitely its own thing. The voice is different. One thing I think is because it's public, right? Like
Okay.
go viral and escalate fast. So that has
Uh,
to be its own team because you can't just have a random person on there. Like, even with Zazzle, I had to pick my team. Like, who can really handle these?
yeah.
Same with Paramount. So, you really got to train someone new. Like, again, I come from a call center background, emails, live chat, all of that. Like, I had to train too because it's so different. It's so different. So that's why it's on its own, I believe, especially in the
Mhm.
companies that I've worked with. It's just because it's its own beast, really.
Yeah. Okay. I never thought of it. So stakes are just much higher with social.
Mhm.
Okay. Very interesting. And so I'm also curious. So when you started here at Zazzle, you mentioned that you started a little bit late in your career. So you graduated college late and then you kind of bounced around before really getting a foothold. Did you and then obviously then going over to Paramount, has starting late in your career brought up questions in your interviews? And if so, how do you address that?
It actually hasn't at
Okay.
all. Um, so when I finally got the community and social media specialist at Zazzle, I believe I was 27, 28.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Um, and I developed really strong relationships there, and like I worked with all kinds of different departments. I think it actually helped me my age, even though granted I only had like this experience, but then I got to move to like a bigger, well-respected company like Paramount Plus. Um, I think my maturity really helped me. And that kind of goes into like when we do talk about it later, like my transition to Paramount Plus.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about that transition about going from Zazzle to Paramount Plus, starting as a customer care social media associate.
Yeah, so I loved Zazzle working there. I wanted something new. I was really honestly kind of getting burnt out too, because I was kind of like supervising people. So I wanted something new, and I saw this, post on LinkedIn for a customer care social media associate for Paramount for at the time it was CBS All Access.
Okay.
And my husband, I met him in LA, so he's from LA, and he wanted to move back to LA because we were in the Bay Area. And I read the description, and it was basically the same thing I was already doing without supervising people, right? Um, and I applied for it and got the job and moved out there within a month, and I loved it. I still love it, so it's been really good. And I kind of brought that same mindset that I had at Zazzle, is like to prove myself, do everything above and beyond. This was a brand new team. I was the second person they hired when they
Oh,
were creating.
wow.
So I was there from the beginning, almost, right? So it's still, and that was another thing that kind of excited me for this, because they were just developing this team. I saw potential growth in there. I'm like, career growth, if I'm here, will be like really good because it's new, right?
Yeah.
It's endless. And I know people get scared of that, like to do like startups, or like they're just building like a role or a team and they don't know where it's going to go. But I took that as an opportunity, because I know I've heard some people like scared, like I don't want to do a startup, I don't want to do this and that, but I'm
Yeah.
like, experience is experience, right? Like you need to just like, you can't be so picky, is what I've also kind of realized and told people, my friends, like you just can't be picky. Sometimes you got to do what you know don't want to do, or try to see the bigger picture, not just like what it is now. So yeah, that's how I ended up there,
Good.
as a customer care social media associate. So it's been a wild ride since then.
That's amazing and amazing just to see how much you've grown in that role and now being in charge of the entire team. And I think you make a good point about when you are interviewing for a role to be able to identify that opportunity for potential growth. And so you knowing like, okay, you didn't start in a management position right off the bat, but you knew that it was a young team and it was going to grow a lot. And so you were able to kind of see that growth path for yourself. I'm also
Yeah.
curious, you mentioned so you are a mom and you are working full time. And so I'm also curious what that experience for you has been like, and kind of how you navigate being a mom and also being, working full time within your career.
Yeah. So a month after I got hired for CBS All Access, I got pregnant.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
and I'm like, and it's weird, and I hate thinking this, but I think a lot of women do, is like when they get pregnant, they're like, oh my God, is this going to derail my
Yes.
career?
Yes.
And that was my first question.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Because like one, I haven't been there long enough yet, you know. Um, and I already knew I wanted to move up. And luckily, I was told like, of course not, it's not gonna derail, but they have to say that. And so, during my pregnancy while I was there, I just continued to, like I said, like prove myself, work really hard. I was getting a lot of like projects just for myself too assigned to me, and doing stuff, and even like teaching like new hires like how to do stuff, right? Um, and I didn't realize my worth, and I don't think anyone else did until I left for maternity leave. Because when you leave for maternity leave, you have to assign your responsibilities to other people, which is what I
Hmm.
did. And when I got back, they were like, "How did you do all this?" You know? I was like, "Really? Okay." I didn't realize like how much stuff I actually handled by myself. So, I came back from maternity leave and just, kept doing what I was doing and again, like go above and beyond. Like if someone asks like, "Hey, can someone do this for me?" Even if it doesn't sound like, "Oh, that sounds awful," I'll do it.
I
And even if I don't know how to do it, I'm like, "Teach me." Because I'm like,
yeah.
that's a skill I can learn. That's, again, putting yourself out there. Don't wait to be asked, "Hey, can you do this?" Like volunteer yourself already.
Hmm.
But also do a good job at it, obviously. Like,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to ask questions. That's another thing too. People's like assume that you need to get it right away. And maybe, that person didn't explain it as clear as you'd like. So always ask for clarification because you want to get it right the first time.
Yeah. I'm also really curious. So I myself am far away from having children, but I when you said that when you found out you got pregnant, the first thought was is going to derail my career. That gave me chills because I think it's something that you worry you will be looked at differently. I know I worked at companies before, or one company before, where I remember someone had gotten, pregnant. She took her maternity leave, and it was kind of like they kind of hired somebody else. And there's this like fear that if you take your maternity leave, that you could be replaced.
Yeah.
There's also fear, I'm sure, when you stepped away from your role, like I don't know if there's anxiety about is your team going to be able to handle that? Are you like anxious at home, like wondering if everything's okay going at work, and then you're home with your new baby and you want to spend all this time with her, and then you have to make a decision like when to go back. And so all of those things sound very overwhelming and really difficult to navigate. I'm also curious, like, at what point did you tell your company that you were pregnant? Like, did you feel like you had to hold that off? And then when you went on maternity leave, what was it like coming back to work?
Yeah. I told them a little bit after my first trimester. Just because, and I'm sure other moms can relate, is like the first trimester is very sensitive, like,
Hmm.
what's going to happen. So I wanted to make sure, like, I, for one, was healthy, the baby was healthy. First of all, very supportive, um, which like I till this day I'm always grateful for, which is why like I wasn't scared the second time it happened, you know? Um, so yeah, very supportive. And then when I left for maternity leave, because I was still like an associate, I wasn't too worried about that.
Hmm.
Uh, I was more worried about are they going to do a good job with my responsibilities?
Yeah.
Because which they did, thankfully. So good job for them. So yeah, for that one, I wasn't too worried. It was more like my second one, I was worried.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that also speaks to a good company is when you don't
Yeah.
feel super worried about those decisions. And if you are feeling really stressed or anxious, that may be a sign that
Mhm.
that company does not have the right values or the right like protocols in place to make sure that moms feel safe and supported when they go on their maternity leave. Okay, Christine. So you went on this, wild ride of your career journey of starting out really not knowing where you wanted to be, kind of finding your foothold within social media care, and then moving over to Paramount and helping them build out their social media care and support team. And it's a very inspiring journey to now hear that you feel really, happy where you are now, and you found a place where you feel like you belong, but it took you a really long time to get there. My last question for you today is I'm curious if you have any advice for women who are going through a similar experience to you, and anything that you think would help them on their journey?
Um, yeah, so just again, kind of want to go with what I said earlier is one, if you're starting your career late, one thing I really, really stopped doing was comparing myself to other people's career growth.
Mm.
I think that will get into your head a lot because that's what I did at the beginning. It's like, why are all these like 22-year-olds getting like these jobs, Like how is this happening? And it's not me. And I just, I stopped doing that and just like kind of focused on myself. So I mean, it's easier said than done, but you just have to have your mindset like keep saying it over and over and over. Like I woke up every morning and be like, okay, like I can do this, I can do this, I can do this.
Yeah.
That's what I did now, like especially during work, especially during COVID, especially after having my second one. Like I can do this, I can do this. Um, and like for moms too, just to, find that work-life balance for a long time, like because I was a new mom, especially after my second one, I didn't know how to balance being a mom to a toddler, a newborn, and a full-time job, which at that point I was manager now.
Oh
So
my
the
gosh.
responsibilities and stakes were higher, and the hormones and just like everything was all over the place. Um, so just kind of like giving yourself grace and, having that, trying to have that work-life balance. I spent a lot of time trying to prove myself that I can do it all. And I was like getting burnt out at the end. And having those honest conversations, if you're comfortable enough with your employer, which luckily I was, um, and that helped me a lot to kind of like delegate, things and, seek help as well, for postpartum. So that's a thing too. And again, like I think Paramount Plus is really good at supporting mental health and, new moms. I've been very fortunate for that. So if anyone can find like a company like that, I highly recommend it. I know it's hard, but I think a lot of companies are now going toward that direction. I can see it. So yeah, just, don't give up and, keep your door and mind open for other opportunities and job that maybe not be at first what you want, but it definitely can put your foot in the door in the right direction at least.
Yeah, I love that. That's a beautiful way to end an incredible episode. Thank you so much for Christine for walking us through your career journey and for giving us some insight on how to persevere through some tough times in our career. It's been very inspiring to hear from you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I was happy to offer my story and advice.